Now, thinking about strategies and competitive markets as well, particularly in a competitive market, knowing where you stand is extremely important, right? Are you getting the best deal, or are your competitors getting an edge on you? And sometimes this lack of transparency can leave you wondering or overthinking if you are actually overpaying or you are at for value. Today, our very own CEO will pull back the curtain on cost benchmarking and tell us how we can use data to figure out if we are getting the best value of our deal, or if we can improve something, and how to strengthen our energy procurement strategy with that. So please welcome
with me, our very own CEO, Lievens.
Thank you, David. 3 invoices, January 2026, Spain power. Unit price of the first one, so the volume more or less the same. Let's say 100 gigawatt hours a year. Unit price for the first invoice 66, the second invoice 71, the third invoice 60 euro. Now, which
invoice do you hope is yours? If you think, or if you would want that 60 euro
invoice to be yours, you can in a minute raise your green card.
If you say, actually, I don't know yet which invoice I would want.
Please don't look at the suppliers. Don't get emotional about that. Raise your yellow cards. So green, if you want the 60 euro, yellow, if you're like, nah, I don't know yet. Okay, please look around so that you can see who.
Okay. Those who raised the green, you should be ashamed.
And I'll try to make my point. It tells you nothing. It tells you absolutely nothing. But the problem is, everyone you will talk to inside your organization will just say, just make sure you have the lowest price. Negotiate, I don't care, don't make it too complex. They don't like energy, it's too complex. Just make sure I have the lowest price. And so you do what you want to do and you say, hey, I have the lowest price. But I'm not sure that is the best approach. Now, before we try to understand why that is not always the best approach, we need, of course, to take into account a few important aspects. One, the world is changing fast, we know that. And our friend Voltaire always knew. It is absurd to think that you will have certainty. It is absurd to try and
understand.
What you see these days is just going faster. And don't expect this to slow down. At a certain moment, when I entered into the management of E&C in 2019, COVID hit. 2021, 22, energy price market crisis hit. Supply chain crisis hit.
Iran, Russia, Ukraine conflict. Iran, I always think, then it will calm down, then it will not. Right? This is the new kind of reality, you better be prepared.
Now, a few trends to do take into account that will really influence your job is, the first one I would like to focus on is electrotech. Over the course of the past few years, I personally really had to change my mind. There's so much more possible with electricity than we ever thought of before. The first one, the green, sorry, almost broke my leg. The first part, the green one, how we produce electricity. Actually, the fossil fuel electricity production can largely be replaced by solar and storage. And we are getting there. This will be a no-brainer. Physically, the physics of producing power with renewables is just so much more efficient that we will get a long way with that. For the last mile, the peak load that we will need at the end, there will be gas turbines, gas-fired power plants that will always be needed. They're very interesting, so it's an illusion to think that you will get rid of it, but we can go much more on that green part. Road transportation, long-haul transportation will be a challenge, for sure, but there's so much more transportation already being electrified. The last mile transportation is 100% electrified these days, and you see even a great evolution also in terms of trucks.
Heat pumps
have become, in many, many countries, a no-brainer. There are record sales at this moment because of fuel prices and gas prices going up. And then for your industry, I think that many of you that I talked to a few years ago, you said, oh, we cannot electrify. This is not possible. For our production process, it's not. Well, actually, technology is improving that much that for not only low heat, but also mid-heat processes, you can start electrifying. It does start to make sense. And then finally, of course, yeah, the extraction of those fossil fuels is quite energy intensive in itself, so there will be some demand destruction. So electrotech, they call countries with the right policies electrostates, and countries with more conservative policies petrostates. Well, electrostates will have a competitive advantage, right? So we will go much, much farther in terms of electrification. Now, what does that mean? You will get, bit by bit, and that is starting to pop up everywhere, what we call smart grids. Now, a smart grid is not looking like this. I took this from Iberdrola, and I think they're wrong. Now, why do I think they're wrong? They put out all of these different production assets and consumption assets around the center of control. Now, big suppliers and utilities, the grid operators, they have an incentive, they like to keep control over things. They want to know what happens. They don't like if things behind the meter happen that they don't know because they have to balance their grid. The reality will be much more what you see here on the right-hand side. You will have production everywhere. Many of you have become producers. You have consumers everywhere, and then you will have data and data capabilities that we now start to have thanks to technologies like blockchain since a few years, but also AI that will make your grid smart. Now, what is the big thing to understand around a smart grid? You used to have a grid that was building supply based on the expected demand, and that is turning around. You will have a grid where actually your demand will adapt to the supply that is available at that moment. Meaning there is a behavior change on the demand side, and thus that makes your grid much more efficient. The amount of capacity you use from an existing grid will go up, but it will only work when all of these different assets who produce, consume, shift load will communicate with each other. And that will not be one system. There will not be one person in a control room steering that. That is technology agnostic communication between different assets. Batteries communicating with a grid, your production assets communicating with your battery, and so on and so on and so on. So that will be a very fluid, hybrid, organic system that we will see going forward. You already see that in some places in the world. You already see that in some microgrids that they built behind the meter as well. Next trend to take into account to understand where we are is renewables are no longer just about the environment. And this is great. There are a few arguments about those renewables. One, in many places at many moments is the cheapest form of energy. So all of a sudden we're interested because we want that low price. But secondly, and this is very, very visible in the US, renewables held them in the concept what they call speed to power. It's so important. There is an enormous forecast for data center load growth, right? If you have to believe how many data centers will be are waiting to be connected to the grid, it's just absolutely insane. So for them, it's not just about prices, like, can I connect to the grid? Is there enough capacity? Well, the fastest way to build extra capacity is renewables and storage, because that is a matter of months. The alternative, nuclear, well, you need a decade to build. It's the most expensive form of power production. I have a hard time seeing how that will be economically viable. Keeping existing nuclear plants online for as long as possible, that does make a lot of sense. Building new ones, very, very skeptical around that. Coal is being phased out everywhere, doesn't make economic sense, doesn't help the environment either. And then you have gas-fired power plants, which are actually pretty interesting for that peak capacity that you need, because it's a push of a button, so to say, a gas-fired power plant. The problem is, if you want one, you have to wait like 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the order book is so filled that there's just no capacity available. So what do those hyperscalers do? They buy a nuclear plant themselves, and they install renewables at scale. And the final trend, similar to what Luca was mentioning, When you think about greening your supply, this is something that you have to start taking into account. Your annual matching, where you buy an EAC, be it a REC, a GOO, or whatever, to match 1 megawatt hour over a year and say, okay, it's green, this will no longer be accepted. Protocols are changing. This is this is the direction we're going, and actually it's a very positive one. It's a very positive one because we will be stepping away from the big net zero claims, which were actually a bit more harmful than anything else. It's much more interesting to say, let's go for a 70, 75, 80% green decarbonized grid, but do it and match it hourly. And that final bit, the hardest last mile, we will have to solve it with new technologies, and there are industries where there will be carbon capture, any kind of those technologies that you will not be able to avoid. But we will make much faster progress if we aim for the 70, 80% rather than coming with big claims and just buying a bunch of certificates to claim net zero for 100%. So hourly matching is a thing. It will be influencing your cost as well. Now, back to those invoices. Different people buy differently, and I did this exercise a few years ago, and I said, okay, let's repeat the exercise. I took 3 fictitious characters. So if you would recognize behavior in one of those people, that is purely coincident. I mixed and matched. It's not a judgment call. But I took 3 fictitious energy buyers and 1 competitor. Now, the first one is Bob Budget. He works at Reliable Retail Group. The second one is Monica Market. She's in the feedstock business, so chemicals, works at a plastic packaging company. Now, Bob Budget, his energy cost in itself is very low. It's somewhere between 0.5 and 2% of their total operational cost. He's all about budget stability. He's a huge fan of on-site production because, of course, retail, warehouses, you have a lot of warehouses. If you build out renewables, you can really cover a lot of your consumption yourself. Monica Market, she is in a very different position because the energy cost represents like 35% of her total operational cost, so it's massive. She's a fan of strategy. She worked at McKinsey before, so they like strategy. And she actually doesn't really care about the unit price because she says, the risk that I prefer most is the risk that my client takes, right? That's the risk that she prefers. So she says, I don't care about the absolute value of my price, as long as it is at least as good or better than my competitor, I'm happy. That's how she looks at it. And then Tony Transition, I mean, he has a hard job because he came in, he's pretty new to the job. They had an energy manager before, cut down on costs, decided not to replace it, and said, Tony, you're buying our laptops, our phones, and our cars. Can you also buy our energy? Right? He's like, okay, why not? Seizes that opportunity in his career. And he is, like the ones holding the green card, what can be wrong with just buying the lowest price, right? I want to fight for the lowest price. That's all what I'm interested in. So we match those invoices with those people. The 66 euro was actually Bob's price. Monica was at 71 in January, and Tony at 60. Now, these are the fictitious characters that may or may not be in this room. And we still need a competitor. And I was thinking, okay, how do I make an anonymous, fictitious example of a competitor? And I found the best possible competitor ever, Vincent Company. Vincent Company is an idol of mine. He's Belgian. He was a very successful football player for the American soccer. And he is at the moment on his way to win the treble with Bayern Munich. He's already won the league, got to the final of the cup yesterday evening, and about to beat PSG in the Champions League. Now, why is he actually an interesting person for us as our ideal fictitious competitor? When he gives press conferences, he always gets the same question. What do you think about the next opponent? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Which players are dangerous? And his answer is always very consistent. It's like, it's my job as head coach of Bayern Munich to prepare my team to play against the best version of Real Madrid. I cannot count on playing them when they have a bad day. I have to prepare them in the best way. He always says the same thing. So let's do the same thing in terms of energy procurement, thinking about your competitors. You cannot hope that they mess up. They might be working with E&C and actually do a great job. So let's imagine that they always are one step ahead, that they think a bit further. So we'll include our competitor company in the talk today. Bob and Tony have been buying their power on the calendar 26 product, right? So they had their invoice in January, they were buying their power. So Tony at 60, Bob at 66. Now let's look at that product. It has been traded since January 2023. So since 2023, they had the opportunity to start buying and building their price, hedging layer per layer. Imagine, no one would do that, but just to put the risk on the table, if they would have bought everything at the peak at 78, or everything at the best possible moment at 47, that's a delta of 30 euro on 100 gigawatt hours. That's 3 million of risk on the table. That's not to scare you, because the reality is more nuanced. No one would buy their full volume, those volumes at once. But still, the difference between their two prices is 6 euro, so 600,000 euro of cost difference between those two. Now, Monica didn't buy on forward markets on calendar 27 product. Monica is exposed. She doesn't like the risk. She passes it on to her clients, so she's following the spot market. And thus that results in that 71 euro that she paid in January this year, which was the highest. But of course, in February, prices came down in terms of Spanish power. She only paid 20 euros, and then in March 41, and let's see what April brings. So of course, spot markets are a very different breed. Now, important message here, you guys are not a trader. You do not work at an energy supplier. You're not acting in the wholesale market. It is not your purpose to make money on buying or selling energy. That's not the game you play. That's a different kind of sport, right? What you actually do, and this is the case for Bob and Tony, you've got a factory, you run that factory, you buy raw materials at a certain price, a price that is going up right now quite significantly, and actually you just happen to need power and gas to run your operations. That's the role that energy plays. And when you do that well, you create added value and you produce a product which you sell at a certain price. So that energy is something annoying that you need to produce and do what you have to do. It's nothing more than that. Hence, you are not a trader, you're not there to make money. You just want that energy to not negatively impact your business. That's the only goal. It's a very unattractive and unsexy message, but just don't be wrong consistently and you'll be fine, right? Now, for Monica, that's different, because actually she has sort of a direct link. In her feedstock business, that gas plays such an important role that the price at which she does buy that gas is super impactful, and there is a direct link between that gas price and her product price. Because what she does in her business is buying gas, they do a bit of magic with it, and they sell another type of gas, which is just more refined and treated. So for her, when she sells that gas here, any kind of chemical product, they actually have the gas price in the formula of their sales price. So this is what you would call a natural hedge. Now, of course, if she says, that's easy, a natural hedge, no risk for me, the risk is with my client, it's in the market, this results in her total energy cost over the past few years. And when something happens in the market like 21, 22, 23 and onwards, of course, you see a huge volatility in her total energy cost for her business. So the question is there not a better way? Because the 22 one, even if you can pass on that cost to your competitor, it might be painful because our best possible competitor might have a strategy that says, in rising markets, I will be hedging up to 35%. Now, if we compare that to a client, that ideal competitor who has been hedging at 35% each time the market was rising, and he said, okay, prices are going up, I can pass it through, but I will still take a small minimal position to protect my budget, the impact is massive. So you can have a much lower cost, and the savings that were realized in those years, I mean, you have to be right in those years for the next 20 years to offset those. So the problem with Monica is that if she doesn't hedge, it's not ideal. If she does hedge, she does take a risk. So that is why strategy is much more than just a theoretical concept, right? That is why strategy is a living thing that you implement every day. And the first one is a category of budget-oriented clients. Budget-oriented clients, very simple. The majority of businesses out there are budget-oriented. It means there is no link between your energy cost and your product price. If your energy cost goes up, you've got less profits. Every euro, dollar you pay more is just €1 or dollar less P&L, right? Budget-oriented. Cost stability, no surprises, protecting the margin. Market risk is where there is that link. You think back of Monica, there is a link, they move together, and when prices go up and you didn't hedge, but your competitor did hedge a little bit, you have a competitive problem. If prices come down and you hedged and your competitor is floating on the spot market, you have a problem. It's a very difficult one. You cannot hedge too much and too little. It's both a risk, so you have to stay close to the market. Where that budget company will look far into the future and at opportune moments swing big, take large positions, a market-oriented risk profile, which will be not buying on those long-term calendar products, but on quarterly products, monthly products, and move quickly in small portions. And then you have a lot of companies who actually don't really know. They think it's a bit of both. It's more nuanced. Actually, I'm budget-oriented, but yeah, I do need to be competitive, and they do ask me for a price, and there is no direct link, but there's somewhat a link. They take it into account, but with a delay. That is a much more nuanced story. So the question is, just by knowing this basic information, again, asking you to raise the card. If your company is a budget-oriented company, can you please raise the blue card? If you're more market-linked, so you have that link between your products, green. And if you're in a different situation, yellow. For the few people who are not energy buyers in the room, I would like you to participate, but think of it as a private person.
In your home, your supplier offers you a fixed price contract or a variable contract.
Okay, lots of blue, quite a little bit of yellow as well.
And then green. Okay, now there's very little green, that's normal.
That's normal. It's not that common that there's this real direct link. Now let's figure out what this means for the different scenarios. Now, the first question to ask when you think about a strategy is, when are my products actually being sold? In this example of the calendar 26 product, if Tony's company sold their product, they agreed on a price to sell their products back in January 24, so 2 years in advance. Let's say that one of his products is a type of plastic that goes into a car. They make long-term agreements with the car manufacturer at a certain price. He agrees that here to be delivered 2 years later. Anything between then and then is a risk. Whereas for Bob, he agreed the prices like 1 year, 10 months, 9 months beforehand. So understanding when your products are being sold is step one. For Monica, this is particularly difficult because Monica's business, every quarter, the month before the quarter starts, they negotiate the prices for the next quarter. So if we look at Monica today, price has been moving, we are here, Monica is here at this moment, and her team, her sales team, will sell the prices at that moment. The problem is between today and then, the market can go up or go down. We don't know, she doesn't know. So if now she buys and the market goes down, she has a problem. If she doesn't buy and the market goes up, she has a problem. That's market risk. So understanding the link between those two. Now, I hate to kill the vibe, but in your companies, that is why sales leads the dance, not procurement. Syncing procurement to sales is the recipe for success. Understand your sales process, understand your sales cycle, talk to them, involve them. Some of you have witnessed with great success how such conversations with sales have actually led to them changing how they price. Rather than just ignoring energy costs, they started to take it into account. So talk to sales, establish that link. If you are both doing things separately, that's a recipe for disaster sooner or later. Now, Tony just arrived in the job, he's late to the party. This is a gas price, TTF gas price, which was sort of stable since January 24. After the high peak, it came down, and then quite wobbly, but stable. He didn't have a contract for 27 yet. So just a few weeks ago, he negotiated a contract. He didn't hedge yet, but of course he's there, and that's only the moment where he started to have the possibility to hedge. Now, our strong competitor has that contract in place early on, because at least that is all lost opportunity for Tony, just because he didn't have any contract in place. I keep on thinking of a reason why you would not have a long-term contract in place, and I cannot find one. Have your contracts in place on time. You can negotiate with suppliers. If there is uncertainty around business, around volumes, these are things that you can allow. But you can be tough and smart about all the market analysis that you want. If you don't have a contract in place, I'm sorry, but no contract, no party. Now, Tony, as you can see here,
imagine that is the case. You do an acquisition, you enter those sites, there is no contract in place.
Imagine
does that mean that you cannot do anything yet?
You enter those sites, there is no contract in place. Does that mean that you cannot do anything yet? Apart from quickly starting to negotiate those contracts and find one? No. Because our ideal strong competitor thinks of alternatives. Many alternatives, when there are no contracts in place, many of our clients are starting to do financial hedging. So you can do your hedging with your physical supplier, but you can also do it with a third party, a bank, who provides hedging services. This is often for larger volumes, but we see that more and more common also for smaller volumes. We saw it exclusively for gas, we start seeing it also for power. Yeah? Financial hedging has a few advantages. One, reliability of your counterparty. Many of those suppliers in the past have not proven to be the most reliable hedging partners. Some of them disappeared with your hedges. When things get rough, when things get very volatile, they're not always as reliable. Liquidity, you can go further into the future. Transparency, you basically have a spot contract the moment you consume, and that is offset against the hedge you made with that bank. And that is a clear signal, because there you can just see where that market is, the price you hedged, and you have a very transparent view. Whereas with a third-party supplier, it's not always that transparent what is exactly behind that quote at that moment. The next mistake that Tony made is, Tony just likes reading the news so much. And the problem with reading the news so much is that you form opinions about the markets. And that is very dangerous, because that Strait of Hormuz in the past 3 weeks, it opened and closed like 35 times. And each time you see that price moving, that is very, very disturbing. So, does that mean you do not have to follow anything? No, you do have to follow the market. But the only thing that you need to get out of the market is the moment to do something. So you look at the market, you look at a price evolution, and you say this is an opportunity or this is a risk. That's the only thing that you need to see. And you try to understand what kind of risk. If there's a structural risk, if there's a long-term risk, if there's a short-term thing. The problem with such a graph is that you always look backwards. Now I know that this dip was just temporary and it didn't continue, it went back up. When you're there, you don't know that, right? You're blind. So the only thing you do is you monitor the price of the market, you try to quantify the risk, how good or bad is this price historically seen and looking at all the forward products, and then you determine when to do something. Risk or opportunity, simple as that. Then, how much you buy, how far into the future do you buy something for 27 or also already something for 28 or 29, that's your strategy. And Bob, the budget client, he can go farther into the future with larger positions at good opportune moments when you're Monica in your market position, even if it's a good price, well, you take it because it is a good price, but not too much. If it continues to go down, you need to be able to come down with it. If it goes up, it's also not a nightmare. You hedged 30%, you make a lot of money because you pass through that energy cost to your client on that 30%, and on the 70% you pass it through. So the market tells you when to hedge, your strategy tells you when to how much to hedge, how far into the future. All right? I said that Bob loves on-site production. He puts all of his warehouses and retail stores full of solar panels, which cover an amazing 62%. If you compare that to many of your industrial sites, like 8%, 5%, 10%, and he can cover 62%, so it's a great business case. The problem is that he only captures 30% of that for self-consumption. And the rest he starts to inject back into the grid. And as we just learned from Luca, when you inject back into the grid at a moment where solar is oversupplying, you might start doing that during negative hours. So it starts killing his whole business case. So solar, without storage or load shifting, adapting the behavior when you consume, it just no longer makes sense. Beating on-site production that you consume is impossible. So we need to double down on that. Everything that you can produce and immediately consume, there will never be a better business case than that. But you need to be careful about dimensioning and adding storage or flexibility, changing behavior when you go for solar. Now, when you do these things, you have to, of course, take into account your volume management. Because you contracted with your supplier, you communicated the volume. If all of a sudden your sustainability managers are starting to roll out on-site production plans and you're not aware of it, you will get into trouble with your supplier. You risk being overhedged, you risk being underhedged, depending on what they do. So before thinking about on-site production, think about flexibility, think about PPAs, you need to understand your volumes in detail. So our ideal competitors, they have a good view on all of their volumes in detail, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. They understand the profile that they have on an hourly basis, on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, seasonal. A deep understanding of how you consume makes your energy procurement a million times more effective. Now, flexibility, sort of the new word, and often that is reduced to batteries. Batteries are just a fantastic kind of technology. They will play an incredibly important role, but they're just one other form of flexibility. I talked yesterday with someone present here today, who's by the way not a client of E&C, and they said they have a big plant in Spain, big solar, and that plant is asking for a long time already for a battery. What they got instead of the battery is a silo. Because that silo was much cheaper than the battery, of course, but that silo is also a battery. That silo gives them the flexibility to produce when the sun is shining. Early in the morning, they ramp up production. They put excess production into that silo. They ramp down production in the evening. So they start to better match that solar profile. Whether you call that a real battery or a silo, I don't care, it is flexibility. So identifying flexibility is absolutely crucial. So you have to do that. Now, what kind of flexibility do we see? When you think about batteries, which are of course what we see most, there is the before the meter battery. Very interesting, but actually not that much of our business. The before the meter battery helps your grid. It helps it stabilize. There are big, large-scale projects. Financially, they start to make more and more sense. Whatever they're doing there, you will see the impact on your grid, on your non-commodity component of your invoice. Then you have, and those are the dangerous ones, what we call the pseudo behind the meter. It is a battery that is on your site, but that someone else manages. They come in and they will pay for your battery and say, no worries, we just, you will have X of the profits, but those X of the profits will be breadcrumbs. If you have flexibility, if you have that battery, do not give it away. You are big enough. Keep it behind that battery, because what they will do, they will optimize the usage of that battery, and what they can do, and that is smart, that is intelligent, it makes sense for them, is that they will take your battery, they will add it into their pool of flexible assets, and they will start optimizing. And of course, they have that portfolio effect, so they can do that. Again, if I were them, I would do the same thing. But many of you are big, big industrials. When you have flexibility, do not give away your behind-the-meter battery and turn it into a pseudo behind-the-meter. The final version is the real behind-the-meter battery that you have. So again, identify flexibility, keep it for yourself and monetize it. Now, how can you monetize flexibility? There's 4 ways of doing that. Upfront, you can participate in the ancillary services markets or the capacity markets where you basically keep part of your battery available, and then in moments of stress they can use your flexibility, they will use your battery. You always keep part or your full storage available for the grid. You get paid when they call upon it. The second one, very interesting one, day ahead spot market optimization, where there is an arbitrage between the prices and where you basically load your battery in the cheap hours and then unload the battery in the most expensive hours. Good old peak shaving is back, so you can use your battery to do some peak shaving. In many markets in the US, the PJM capacity cost is just going through the roof. It makes the business case to start doing some good old peak shaving. Do you do that by, again, shifting load in your operations or not? Do you do that with a battery? Doesn't matter too much. If you can't do it without a battery, do that first. If not, the business case for the battery just becomes a whole lot more interesting. And then you have the within day. Now be careful within the within day. It's very interesting. The intraday spreads are becoming high. Those are the news articles that you see, oh, price hit 25,000 euro for that hour and the battery guys made so much money. I can tell you, no, they didn't. There are very, very few players who actually already make money within the day. It's not that easy to, within the day, within a few minutes, start adapting. So most of the money today is made on those first 3, and the 4th one is up and coming. Next thing that's caused trouble for some of those buyers, and we heard that from Luca as well, not every PPA is a good PPA, right? PPAs are incredibly interesting, but you have to manage carefully what kind of PPA they are. They come in different shapes. The PPA market is in its puberty. The PPA market is no longer new, but it's also not like really mature yet. Where the PPA market is a market where we've seen extremely illiquid products that shifted all of the risk, volume risk, price risk, spread risk in case of cross-border PPAs to you as a consumer. Of course, that was not interesting, but they were very good as hedging instruments. So for part of your volume, minimal parts, it did make sense if you had big enough of volume. Now, what we see in those PPA products that we're seeing now, you see those hybrid PPAs, co-located storage, so solar co-located with storage, and more sort of going into the direction of baseload products, because those big players, they can start grouping assets and package it to you. The duration of those PPAs is shortening. You can see not just solar PPAs, but solar combined with storage and wind. That starts to become interesting, right? So, very interesting to observe. Keep looking out for them, but be very, very, very critical. You can make expensive mistakes. Non-commodity optimization. So I mentioned the peak shaving for the capacity costs. Capacity costs are a very interesting part of your cost. It's one that you don't control at where it is. I mean, it's set, it's regulated, but it is increasing in importance. And think back of what I said about the smart grid. Whatever is happening in that grid is reflected in those non-commodity, those regulated cost components. And they are evolving based on the policy of that market. So I gave the example of PJM, which is a very market under an enormous amount of stress, a lot of production assets being retired, and an enormous amount of load growth. But there is an underutilization of an existing grid. If you would go to a smart grid with flexibility, where the demand is really adapted to the supply, you could actually use your grid in a much more efficient way. And that is a phase where it's very uncertain. It's early days, and you need to see how it evolves in the next few years. At very different paces across the world based on the markets. The next one that you have to look at, and that your competitor is looking at, tax exemptions. Don't underestimate tax exemptions. They are coming in different shapes all over the world. Again, policy driven. Some of them make sense, some of them don't make sense. But I can tell you, your competitor is using them, right? Keep looking out for them. They change, so you have to, it's not because you looked last year at them that you do not have to look at them this year. Now, What does that all mean? Our ideal competitor is no longer an energy manager. He's kind of a CEO, Chief Energy Officer, and he has built a cross-functional team around him. Now, what is that cross-functional team? It is the CFO and sales for that strategy. You have to talk to them to understand the business to determine what kind of strategy you will apply. The controllers, because they are looking at your reporting, where your costs is, where your actuals are versus your budget, and so on. Treasury is getting incredibly important. Why is Treasury getting important? I talked about financial hedging or about PPAs. Well, if you hedge with your supplier, that hedge is on the books of the supplier, and you only will pay when the invoice comes in after the consumption. When you hedge with that financial institution, that hedge is on your books. And between the moment that you consume it and that you have hedged, there is a value that will be volatile because the market is moving. If you hedge at 50 and the market is at 40, it will have an impact on your accounting. They call it, for the PPAs, the fair value of your PPA. If you have a PPA signed at a certain price and then the market strongly evolves, you will have to recalibrate, you have to revalue and put a fair value to the accountant, to the auditor, that will look at that. So you cannot do all of this if you're not talking to your treasury, to your accounting department. Make sure they're on board before you start the talks. Energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is no longer a pure engineering thing. The engineering thing is there in the sense of, can I electrify this furnace? Can it be, instead of a gas furnace, can it be an electric boiler or whatever? But the energy efficiency is becoming a data thing. So the link between you and the energy efficiency is that profile, is that meter data, is that sub-meter data. If your sites don't have digital meters, you will get into trouble. If you don't have visibility on your processes, and for some of you, your sub-process, you will get into trouble, right? So you need to establish that. Sustainability manager, well, speaks for itself. Whatever your decarbonization targets are, whatever you want to do there, it has an impact on your procurement. Some of you combine those roles, right? Your sustainability manager and energy procurement manager. If you don't, make sure to be in an office next to them, right? You want them close, because they will be driven more by ideology than by cost, and your incentives might not always be the same. Your plant managers, you have to have a very close contact with them. Plant managers being your sources of information about volumes. The better, as I said, the better you have a view on your future volumes, the more successful you will be. They know how the plant runs, and you have to communicate with them. IT, establishing IT solutions to get access to meter data, faster access to invoices, to whatever. You need IT support. You need to have a direct link with them so that you can have the right tools in place to monitor your portfolio. So you see, that energy manager at our competitor has built a cross-functional team. It looks very different across all the organizations that we see, clusters, hybrid forms, centralized, decentralized, but make sure that if no one is talking to you because you're the one doing that difficult, volatile, complex thing that is called energy, that you open up the door and surround yourself with a much, much larger cross-functional team of colleagues. Now, back to those invoices. As we said in the beginning, the absolute price level doesn't matter. And actually, what does matter then is the impact on the P&L. And for those three examples that we took, this is the actual impact on the P&L. So for Bob, with his price of 66, actually, when they negotiated their sales contracts, he budgeted for a price of 67.5, was well in advance, started hedging, sales used that price, put it in, they had a margin, and his job was to protect the margin, and because of the market, not because he was speculating, but because of the market evolution, was able to improve that. Happy days. Monica, with her 71, in theory, there is no impact on the P&L because she just passed on the risk. But of course, that's not true because there's a loss of opportunity. If she would have hedged at moments of rising prices, she could have had a positive impact on the P&L, which she didn't have today. And then Tony, surprise, surprise, with his lowest price, he was caught by surprise. He came in late to the party. He didn't have his contracts in place. He didn't align his PPA. He didn't align on the volumes, was overhedged, had to sell back, and actually had a negative price on their P&L. So your only job is to manage the impact on the P&L. And that is a hard story internally, because they say, just give me the lowest price. And that is much more nuanced than that. So, 6 steps to take your energy management to the next level. 1, get your data under control. Again, all the insights, all the knowledge you want, best negotiation skills. If you don't have your data, you're blind. 2, execute your risk management with military discipline. There is no crystal ball there, there's no guessing, there is no gut feeling. Establish your strategy, set up the rules, execute. And don't look at the news the day you execute. Okay? Maximize on-site production and consumption. Keep doing that, no-brainer, all over the world. Look for flexibility and keep it for yourself. Don't be lured into agreements. They are sharks, the flexibility guys, the optimizer companies popping up everywhere as mushrooms. They pop up, they come with optimizer solutions, they try to lure you into some virtual pool of flexible assets, but actually they will be optimizing for themselves. And you can see that because what happens with optimizer startups, they're all backed by private equity who wants to see the money come in. And as soon as they start in terms of ideology, looking behind the meter optimization, they figure out it's actually pretty hard to make money on it. So they move, they cross the bridge and go and stand into the market. They become balancing trading partners. They start trading energy for themselves and use the flexibility. For the system as a whole, that's not per se a bad thing. It makes the grid more resilient, more flexible and so on. But for you, the big consumers who have flexibility, it's an asset. Keep it, do not give it away. What used to be 20 years ago, something that was costing you money, is actually now an asset that you have and that you can use. Go green hourly. You don't have to do that today if it is not in the plans, but just prepare your mind. You will have to do that. You will not be able to do that without the data solutions, but we will be matching hourly going forward. And then finally, set up a cross-functional team around you. That is very important in terms of alignment, because not aligning internally can be a very costly mistake. Thank you very much.